Good evening, everyone. You've made it to the Ideas from Impact webinar. We're just going to give it a few moments for people to come in and then we'll get going. So there's currently 140 people with us. So this is being recorded. We can't hear or see you, so make yourself comfy, get settled in. We've got a really cool webinar coming up this evening for you. So welcome if you've just joined us. You have made it through to the Ideas to Impact webinar. We're just waiting for a few people to come in and then we'll get going. We're up to 200 people now. Okay, we seem to have slowed down, so I'm just going to get started. So welcome. Like I said, this is from Ideas to Impact webinar. I'm Hayley Luxton. I'm the Head of Research Impact and Engagement at Prostate Cancer UK. As I've said, this webinar is being recorded, but we can't see or hear you as attendees, so please make sure you get comfortable. This is going to be an awesome webinar for the next hour or so. As people are presenting their work and talking about their experience, please feel free to put questions into the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, as we'll be answering these towards the end of the webinar. Please don't share any personal health information. If you wish to discuss anything specific about yours or another's health condition, please call our specialist nurses, as they'll be able to help you in more detail. Their contact details will be put into the chat. Also, just to give you a little bit of warning, we are going to be talking about some sensitive topics, and it's really important that you take care of yourself and look after yourself. So if anything gets a bit too close and if starts to affect you because of their personal stories, please feel free to step away. You're always welcome back if you feel up for it. But this is being recorded, so if you want to watch it back at a later date, you've also got that opportunity as well. So if this isn't your first webinar, you know that we do like our polls. So we're just going to take a minute to do our first poll of the evening, and this is to get a better idea of who's in the audience today. So this is so we can better our content. So please select any of the below that apply to you, and you can select multiple. So while you're doing that, I'll just give you a brief overview of today's webinar. So first up, we've got Ian, who's going to be sharing his story and real life experience of prostate cancer. And then we're going to be hearing from three of our fantastic researchers, Professor Clare Verrill, Professor Richard Bryant, and Dr Laura Chang, who will be talking us through the Prostate Cancer UK funded Vanguard Path project and the AI tool Artera AI prostate biopsy assay that supports it. And at the end, we're going to finish with a live Q&A. So please do submit questions that you have in the Q&A box throughout, and we'll try to address these as much as we can at the Q&A session at the end. So I think that poll is now done. So thank you very much for taking part in that poll. And we're going to hand over now to our first speaker of the evening, who's Ian. So Ian, welcome to the webinar. Thank you for joining us.
Great, thank you.
And over to you.
Yeah, hello everyone. My name's Ian. I was 53 in October 2001 when I was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer. I'm 57 now. I'm basically very fit. I race motorbikes in the desert. I do marathon running. I do Ironman events. I've cycled the Tour de France even, which is for charity, which was 4,000 kilometers over three weeks. I'm the father of 4 children who are all grown up now, and they're following in my footsteps, doing all marathon running and high rocks gym events and riding motorbikes as well. So they're my main motivator for remaining very, very positive about all of this because I hope to see some grandchildren at some point. So, regarding my diagnosis, which was October 2021, I didn't really have any symptoms at all, but at one point I started to have pain in my ribs, and I had to curl up a little bit on the couch every now and then with pain. And I was at the doctor's, and I mentioned it to a nurse who said, "Look, you should get an X-ray for that." So I did. I really had no other symptoms. Um, it was quite slow progress, actually. The doctor, my GP, arranged a PSA blood test, which I didn't really know anything about. And then a month later, she said, "Well, yeah, that's it's a bit high, so we'll organise another." And then another couple of more weeks, and then she said, "Yeah, that one's high, so we'd like you to see a consultant." And then I saw this consultant towards the end of December, and the consultant tested me again and said, "Yeah, your PSA is 1,300. The other two were 600 and 700. By the way, usually when it's over 4, we start to worry." So he then also told me that it had metastasized. I'm not very good at that word, excuse me, which I learned then means it spread. And it had spread to my spine and my pelvis and indeed my ribs. So I was a little bit upset at that time and a little bit frustrated because I didn't know anything about PSA, I have to admit. At 40, I'd had thyroid cancer, and 5 years after that, when I was 45, I was all clear. I said to my consultant there, "Is there anything I can do to make sure I don't get any other cancers?" And he rather facetiously said, "Well, we could remove a lung or a kidney, and that would half your chance." And I'm a bit, with hindsight now, I mean, well, why didn't he say, "Well, as you approach 50, get a PSA test or get a bowel cancer check"? So I'm a little bit disappointed about that. And when I look back over time, I mean, leading up to my diagnosis, over the years, I've sponsored many people to do bungee jumps, canoe, along kayak, skydiving, things like that. I grew a moustache when I could for Movember, but I never read the small print. And I'm a bit embarrassed about that. I didn't know enough about the PSA test. So I'm an intelligent person. I've been well educated, and so if I've not known about it, there must be millions of other people as well. So that's basically why I'm doing all of this work for Prostate Cancer UK to try and publicise it. My treatment, it took a while. Like I said, the PSA readings took a while, and I feel the doctor could have been a bit more honest immediately. But I now have hormone treatment. I have 6 monthly injections of decapetil. Again, very good with these long words. And incidentally, I learned that it's not 6 monthly; it's every 24 weeks, which is a difference. 6 monthly is 26 weeks. One of the nurses pointed that out to me, so I now definitely have them every 24 weeks. And then on a daily basis, I take enzalutamide Xtandi. I take 4 little yellow tablets every day. I also have to take vitamin D, calcium, and alendronic acid once a week. And of course, I take my thyroxine because I don't have a thyroid anymore. How's the treatment slowed me down? How has the treatment has been affecting my life? It has slowed me down a bit. I am definitely experiencing the menopause. I get hot flushes. I get terrible brain fog. I get confused. I get in a panic every now and then. Sometimes I struggle to get my words out, especially when it's new things. I have terrible short-term memory loss, and I actually have a lack of motivation to do the things that I love. But thankfully, I push myself, and I managed to get over that. I don't work anymore. I had to stop because of the brain fog. I was in a position of quite high responsibility, and I was working all around the world. I couldn't be insured, so I couldn't do my job basically. But I was lucky. I am one of the lucky ones. I'd had a good job. I'd got a lot of savings, and I can live comfortably. And I've cashed my pension in, and I'm okay. Um, I now actually volunteer for a friend's motorbike tour company, and I've travelled in the last 4 years. I've travelled all around the world: South America, Africa, the Himalayas, Cambodia. I'm actually off to Morocco tomorrow, driving a four-wheel drive to support some guys on a motorcycle trip, and I will be giving them each a lesson in the dunes. So yeah, stage 4 doesn't mean it's over. There's still life in the old dog yet. And I feel very blessed for the things that I can do, and I do concentrate on the things I can and not on the things I can't. I have had to stop running. I've given that up because of the compression in my spine. And I've made a conscious decision to continue motorcycling, the off-road motorbiking. I probably shouldn't, but for my state of mind, my mental health, I do it, but I do it very carefully, and I don't do it for as long periods as I used to. I also, I support my children now in all the events that they do, which is fantastic. It frustrates me a bit that I can't compete with them quite as much, but yeah. On the sex life side, it was okay initially for the first year or so, and I thought everything that they tell you is rubbish, and we're going to be okay. But basically, it then fell away very quickly, and for the past 2 years, it's like a switch has been turned off. Basically, I have memory about sex life, but I can't perform, and I have absolutely no interest, no urge. So it's difficult to explain, but it's just part of life. And I have a very, very understanding partner, and yeah, we kiss and cuddle. It's gone, and I don't worry about it. It's a little bit the same with alcohol. I used to enjoy a few beers after a game of rugby with my mates. Now I maximum one, and then I'm in trouble really. So, and I'm not that bothered. It's again, so I tend to not drink anything at all, because it's easier. My friends have learned that I don't drink, and just every now and then on a special occasion I might have a quiet one. So yeah, I'm thankful that again, I'm thankful for things I can do. I I the big issue is the motivation. I know I love my motorcycling and my cycling and my hiking and my adventures, but it's very, very difficult to get off the couch. I find myself watching more and more television, especially at this time of year, and then I get a bit panicky if I've got to go and do something like this trip to Morocco. But I know from memory that it will be okay. So I push myself, and I overcome my worries, and when I'm doing it, I'm having a great time. And I tire myself out. After this couple of weeks or 3 weeks that I'm away, I will come back and I will spend several days on the couch, unashamedly watching television. So, how did I discover the charity Prostate Cancer UK? Well, when I first got diagnosed, for the first couple of years, I told nobody. I told my children, and I told some very, very close friends, but I didn't tell my parents because I thought it would kill them, to be honest. And I certainly didn't go on social media or tell anyone. But then, 2 years into my diagnosis, I saw Sir Chris Hoy. He was on the television and he spoke, and I saw so many similarities between Chris and myself, apart from the 6 or 7 gold medals and the knighthood, of course. But I signed up immediately for his Tour de Four. Interestingly, I did Tour de Force, which was the Tour de France. So the Tour de Four felt close to me. My children signed up as well, and lots of my friends. I personally raised £6,000. My little group of friends, we made well over 10,000, and we had lots of supporters, which was fantastic. And my message asking for the sponsorship money was, look, don't worry about the sponsorship. What's more important is that you tell your dad, you tell your son, you tell your mate, you tell your uncle, tell people, spread the word, go and get a PSA test. And what it is, it's a blood test. It doesn't take long. So when all of that happened, Prostate Cancer UK actually contacted me and said, would I do things like this, which is what I'm doing, and the more I do it, and the more I put it out on social media, I've personally received a lot of calls from friends and friends of friends who've gone and done a PSA test. They didn't know about it. They were as ignorant as I was, and they've found out they've got stage 2 or stage 3 cancer and prostate cancer, and they've been saved, and they're going through operations and things like that. So this is what motivates me. I want to spread the word that the awareness, the screening, we should get checked at 50 as soon as we can. Spread the word amongst all of your friends, and I also want to say that life isn't over straight away when you're told you've got a terminal cancer, because I've been done lots of things. I'm a little bit slower, but you know. And I want to raise more money for Prostate Cancer UK, because they are keeping me alive. The pills that have been made available to keep me alive and many other men come as a because of all of this research. So yeah, I want to say thank you, and I want to say thank you to anyone who donates and sends money to Prostate Cancer UK. That's why I'm here, and
Thank you,
thank you
Ian.
for ensuring me that I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. Thank you for cycling for Tour de Four. Amazing that you did that. And thank you for raising awareness. It's brilliant, and the lives that you saved because of that life-saving awareness. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm going to move us on now to the research section. Ian will join us again at the end for the Q&A session. So if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A section for us. So we're going to move on to our researchers. So we're going to talk about a project called Vanguard Path and the Artera AI prostate biopsy tool. So I'm going to hand over to Claire, Laura, and Richard, and we're going to start with Claire. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you very much, Hayley. I am assuming you can see a PowerPoint presentation in slideshow mode. Yeah, fantastic.
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. I've got the technical bit out of the way, so it's all going in the right direction. So thank you very much for the invitation to speak today. So I'm talking, as mentioned, about a study called Vanguard Path, where we really are using AI to bring the future into focus. It's an exciting newly funded Prostate Cancer UK study, and we're evaluating a novel AI technology. But before I launch into the study, I really need to set the scene a bit and explain why we're doing this and what we've been doing in my speciality of histopathology to really evolve the speciality. So I did most of my growing up in the 80s, and so I'm fascinated by how the technology we had then has evolved to the technologies we have today. You know, and I would spend hours coding my computer with games like teletennis, and really technologies being deployed in histopathology and really making a very, very positive difference. So histopathology is otherwise known as cellular pathology, and we're a speciality within pathology whereby we receive specimens, so either something like a prostate biopsy, or we receive a specimen like on the top left there, which is a radical prostatectomy specimen, and we will either process the whole specimen through the lab or parts of it to show particular features that we want to be able to report on. And so we transfer the pieces of tissue into individually numbered lab cassettes. They're processed in machines and dehydrated and eventually put into molten wax, and then that's made cold and solid. And so we have a paraffin wax block, which is sectioned on a microtome, which is on the bottom left there. And I'm going to show you a high power picture of that in a second. And then we create the glass slides that we report on, and we use a pink and purple stain called hematoxylin and eosin, or H&E. And we would previously have reported those glass slides on microscopes, and then taken the report to the multidisciplinary team meeting for discussion with the other clinicians. And Prof Bryant is going to talk a bit more about MDT meetings in the last talk of our session. So this is a biomedical scientist, and they work alongside us pathologists, sectioning the paraffin wax blocks. You create an ultra-thin slice, they get floated onto a water bath, and then you pick the slides up onto a glass slide and stain them for that pink and purple stain that we use. So, as I alluded to, we used to report on glass slides on microscopes, but we were flagged by the UK government's life sciences strategy as being ripe for innovation, and that we should be digitising those glass slides to create whole slide images, and that's how we should be doing our reporting. So we've got some pathologists, one of which looks quite familiar on the top left there, and then on the bottom, those are the slide scanners. So we still create the slides, but they go into a scanner and create a digital image that you interact with like you would a glass slide on a microscope. And it brings a few challenges going digital. So we achieved it in the summer of 2020, and it solved some of the challenges around, obviously that was the first wave of the COVID pandemic, bringing technology in, creates flexible, robust services when you can't necessarily be in the building or be in the same room as somewhere else. So COVID really shone a spotlight on how digital technologies can really transform our speciality. But yeah, there are other challenges as well. You have to change the workflow through the lab, and also you create a huge amount of data. Each whole slide image is about 1 gigabyte, and we dwarf the radiology department by a clear mile. But obviously, having digital pathology is the infrastructure on which we can start to bring in artificial intelligence. You can't run it on glass slides. And there's sort of 2 tiers of AI that we're using in pathology. Some AI that assists us with our reporting and does things that we already do, but maybe helps us to do them more robustly. And also novel AIs that have been trained on thousands of slide images to predict novel insights into disease biology. So when I'm reporting, this will be the portal where I put my report in. If I hit the green S in the middle there, that takes me to the digital pathology platform on the slides. And if I hit the globe on the right there, that's our AI portal. And we use the AI to help us with tumour detection, so finding cancer, grading it with Gleason scoring, and quantifying how much tumour is there. And so this deployment of technology really is a reality. These are things that we're able to use now. And AI can really help with workflow. So I might have a set of prostate biopsies from a man that has several slides, 12 or 20, something like that. And it might be that the last slide is the one that has a tiny bit of cancer in it. And I can use the AI to quickly see that last slide is the most relevant one. And it can guide me straight to the most important part of the slides. And there's been loads of excitement around AI and pathology, and a lot of it is focused on prostate cancer detection. There's tens of thousands of prostate biopsies done in the UK, each year, and across the world, many, many more. And so you can see that if you have an AI that can potentially make you more efficient in what you're doing, that it could really be an important tool. But we know that what we do has some limitations. So we know there are limitations to Gleason scoring. So we know, as you probably know, the Gleason score is a measure of how much the cancer resembles prostate tissue, basically how differentiated it is. And so a higher Gleason grade means there's less gland formation. So the glands are the round things with holes in the middle. And so the less of those you get and the more fused the glands become, the higher the Gleason grade. And the score's assembled by the most predominant grade plus the second most predominant grade. So you'll have something like 3 + 4 = 7. There's variability between labs and between pathologists in how Gleason scores are assigned, and that's highlighted in this paper. And so AI could potentially come in and help to standardise some of these assessments. And also we know that some men with the same Gleason score will do, their disease will behave very differently. And so there's potential to find new ways of supplementing Gleason scoring with new tools and technologies that can give you new insight into how a disease will behave. So this is what a prostate biopsy looks like to me. So on the top left, you've got a slide image of benign, so no cancer prostate tissue, and the benign glands are quite widely spaced and quite large with the white bits in the middle, which are the lumina. And then on the right, you've got a prostate biopsy with prostate cancer in it. And you can see that at the bottom, there's those punched out holes or spaces, they're the glands, and there's more gland formation at the bottom of that biopsy than at the top. So the bottom bit's a lower Gleason grade than the bit at the top of the biopsy. A few years back, we surveyed Prostate Cancer UK supporters about the use of digital technologies in histopathology, and there was almost universal support for testing of AI. So less than 1% were not in favour, but there were some concerns, but I think they're perfectly addressable. Some wanted a human in the loop, but that is what we're talking about here. We're talking about having expert pathologists just being supported by these technologies, not removing pathologists from the equation. Some wanted more information, and some would defer the decision to use the technologies to an expert, so somebody like myself. So on to the Vanguard Path study then. So this is evaluating novel guidance, artificial intelligence for clinical management decision support in prostate cancer pathology. So we're evaluating a novel AI technology called Artera Multimodal AI, and you're going to hear from Dr. Laura Chang next, who's going to tell you a bit more about what this AI actually does. But it's really exciting, and you can see from the number of partners that we've got on there that it's a large, complex study, and I've assembled a fantastic team of experts across a wide range of specialities. So I have computer scientists, statisticians, nurses. So it's a really exciting study that we're launching. And I'm the overall principal investigator of the study, but I have some co-leads. So Prof Bryant, who's coming on in this session, is a co-lead and Professor of Urology at Oxford, together with Professor John Anning, who's a Professor of Urology at Bristol, and Dr Rao Srinivasa, who's a molecular biologist in Oxford, and he's going to lead some of the more exploratory parts of the study. The four of us haven't quite made it into a room together yet. So we've been on lots of Teams calls, but three of us made it into the room together in the summer. So that was really nice. And we've had lots of publicity, and we launched officially in November, and we had quite a lot of positive press coverage. And this is the article that was in the Telegraph. And so Vanguard Path is a newly funded study by Prostate Cancer UK. It's a transformational impact award, hence the large number of partners that we've got there. And we really need to show, real impact. So we've got multiple sites, and we're going to be testing the AI in Oxford, Bristol and Glasgow. You're going to hear more about our industry partner, Artera, in a moment, but we're evaluating their multimodal AI in slides with known, so we know the clinical outcome, and unknown, so we don't have enough follow-up to have the clinical outcome, but we can look at the impact of the AI on clinical decision making. And so we're aiming to evaluate the Artera AI for appropriate management of patients in a real-world setting, understand how to help prevent over and under treatment of prostate cancer patients, and look at the feasibility of integrating this technology into NHS infrastructure and gain feedback from the end users. So that's pathologists, urologists, oncologists, cancer nurse specialists and patients. And we see this as a vital stepping stone to routine use. So this study will pave the way for that. We featured in Prostate Cancer UK's Christmas fundraising campaign, which was exciting. And although we only launched the study in November, we've been doing a lot of work in the background. So we've been creating a powerful data set, assembling thousands of men's slide images with the outcome data, and creating the repository for the study data, slides and other data. So we've been doing a lot of the groundwork to get the study running. I've spent quite a lot of time selecting out the best slides to run the AI on. So that's me looking in the data repository to do that. And it comes with challenges. So when we talk about the sets of slides with known clinical outcomes, they have longer follow-up, and sometimes having old slides means they might be a bit faded, or you might see something like this. This is a slide, a biopsy that's been put on a sponge, and so all these holes are where it's sat on the sponge, and that's sitting on the tumour area. And we don't yet know how slides that are less than perfect will fare when we run the AI. And obviously that's one of the questions we're going to attempt to answer in this study. So I'd like to thank the Vanguard Path team that I've assembled. There's a lot of them, and they're completely expert in their field, so I'm really grateful for all of their support. I'm obviously really grateful to Prostate Cancer UK for believing in our vision, and also to the Prostate Cancer UK supporters who've donated money to enable projects like this to happen. We're all super grateful, so thank you very much for listening, and I'm going to hand over to Dr Laura Chang from Artera, who's going to tell you a bit more about the technology.
Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you so much to Prostate Cancer UK as well for this opportunity to speak with you today. So my name is Laura Chang. I work at Artera, and I serve as the Senior Vice President of Product. So how do we take these tools from research and push them into clinical care? So one of the biggest challenges that we have with prostate cancer is that each man is different with a wide range of possible outcomes. And so as we know, with some patients, they can live for years with the disease and not really need any treatment at all. And other patients, the disease can spread very quickly and require more aggressive treatments. So our goal is to understand which treatment is best for each individual and how we can reduce both over and under treatment for men with prostate cancer. It's this need to personalize cancer treatment that has led to the development of risk stratification tools. Claire was mentioning Gleason scores. Those were developed in the 1960s to look at the pathology to determine aggressiveness of the cancer. More recently, there are genomic classifiers that have been around now for more than 10 years. And the latest approach to better improve risk stratification for patients is to leverage digital pathology and artificial intelligence. So AI has already been demonstrated in other fields to be really helpful at taking in a lot of information and then simplifying all of that to deliver a straightforward result. At Artera, we focus on building what we call multimodal AI algorithms or MMAI tools. And this means we take two different types of information. There's clinical data, so data and information that's available at the time of the diagnosis for the prostate cancer patient. These are variables like age, PSA levels, and T stage. And then there are a second mode called digital pathology. So as Claire was mentioning, now it's becoming more routine to take pictures of these prostate cancer tissue specimens and have them on hand. And our goal has been to take just these multiple modes that we think are readily accessible. So nothing extra in addition has to be done with the patient. There's no additional procedure that has to be done or to extract more information. These are things that should be readily available at the time of diagnosis. So these two types of information are then input into an Artera AI prostate test. And what the Artera test provides are prognostic risk scores, as well as predictive information. So the prognostic risk scores will tell you how aggressive the cancer is by reporting how likely the cancer will recur. And the predictive output indicates whether or not a particular therapy is likely to benefit the patient. And very specifically with the Artera test, we have a predictive outcome for hormone therapy or for short-term ADT if provided with radiation. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. I want to talk a little bit more about AI and how it works. And so remember that AI is this broad goal of getting machines to perform tasks that normally require human intelligence. And the type of AI that Artera test uses is called computer vision. Computer vision focuses on getting machines to interpret and act on visual information. So on the left hand side of this slide here, you've probably seen this type of thing circulating the internet. Like, is this a puppy or is it a bagel? And as a human, we can intuit what the thing is within this image because we've seen a lot of them before, right? There's like little lumps on this image that to us look like ears versus, little bits of bread. And it might be hard for us to actually identify what is about like the sheen of this fur that looks like a puppy versus the sheen of the bagel that looks like a bagel. But AI can't intuit these things. AI has to learn these things. And so in order to get AI to learn, we have to give it lots of data. And so if you wanted to build an AI to be good at discerning puppies versus bagels, you have to give it lots and lots of pictures of puppies and bagels, and then you have to give it a ground truth. So for every picture that you give the AI, you have to tell it, this is a puppy or this is a bagel. And what it's trying to learn in these pixels are the patterns that make it more likely to be one versus the other. So if we take this into the context of what Artera is trying to do with prostate cancer, what we have to do here is now give AI a bunch of images of prostate cancer tissue. And here then we can say, instead of whether or not it's a prostate cancer or not prostate cancer, we actually want to know how likely the patient will recur. And so the information that we're giving it as the ground truth is, did this patient have a recurrence? And if they did, when was it? And so now for every patient, we're able to then train all this information. Once we have an AI that's trained, we then try to test that it's right. And so when you use AI on new pictures that it hasn't seen before, this is what we call validation. So this is actually the workings of our AI tool. We developed it using clinical trial data. So these are data from patients that are enrolled in clinical trials, and we know how well they did. We know what their outcomes were. And from each patient, again, we're collecting the right input data, so clinical information like age, PSA, T stage, and then the images of their prostate cancer specimens. For every image, they're actually broken down into further pieces. These pieces are called patches, and each patch is then put into that computer vision model. That computer vision model is then extracting out those relevant features that it was trained on to understand if if the features are relevant to a more aggressive cancer or a less aggressive cancer. And then the clinical variables and the feature vectors from the image are put back together into another AI model that is responsible for producing an AI risk score, where the higher the risk score, the more aggressive the disease, the more likely that the patient's going to recur and occur sooner, and the lower the risk score, the less likely the patient's going to recur, or the much longer time they're going to have until they do recur. So that's the lower risk. So this is an example of what happens when we now test the AI on data that it has not seen before. And so this is a cohort of patients, of more than 3,000 patients that have localized prostate cancer. And what the AI is doing here is classifying these patients into low, intermediate, and high-risk disease based on what it sees in that image and based on those clinical variables. And so for patients in this study, you can see that for some of them, they're identified as low risk by the AI. And so they have a 2% risk of developing a distant metastasis at 10 years. For those with intermediate risk, they have a 5% chance of developing distant metastasis at 10 years. And then for those at high risk, they have 22%. So there's a clear risk stratification here that the AI is able to do to identify very low risk patients and high risk patients. I mentioned that our AI is also tuned for identifying patients who will benefit more from short-term ADT or from hormone therapy. And we were very lucky to be able to access a randomized controlled trial where patients were randomized to either receiving just radiation or radiation with hormone therapy. And what the AI does is it actually gives a categorical result here where it says there are biomarker positive patients and biomarker negative patients. And for the 1/3 of patients in this trial that were biomarker positive, you can see they had a significant reduction in their overall risk of distant metastasis when provided short-term ADT with their radiation. And for 2/3 of the patients that were identified as biomarker negative, there was no significant difference in the patient outcomes when they were provided short-term ADT or if they were just provided radiation alone. And so what we're able to conclude here is that although the standard of care for men within the study is to receive hormone therapy in combination with radiation therapy, only 1/3 actually need it. And so when we're providing back this result, we're providing back the category. And for men who are biomarker positive, they can conclude from themselves they might benefit more from hormone therapy and therefore receive it. And for those that are biomarker negative, that might be more reason to avoid hormone therapy and avoid the effects of hormone therapy. And so on my last slide, I'd like to show an example of the test report. So when we run the AI model on any clinical sample on patients, then this is what the provider and the patient receives back. So the AI is going to provide an overall prognostic risk. So it's that low, intermediate, or high that you saw on the other slide. And then for each individual patient, they get an individual estimate of their overall risk of distant metastasis at 10 years. So in this particular example, this patient has a 1.8% chance of experiencing distant metastasis in 10 years from their diagnosis. We also have information on their risk of potential death from their prostate cancer. And then also patients who are eligible for active surveillance. For those that have an overall AI risk of low, they are put in this consider active surveillance category. Lastly, for patients that are eligible for short-term ADT, they get the short-term ADT biomarker. In this particular example, the patient is negative. And so with that, I would like to hand it over to Dr. Richard Bryant, who will speak more about the further validation of this tool and with the MDT within the Vanguard Path study.
Okay, so hopefully you can see my slide.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, great. So thank you, Laura. And as both Laura and Claire said, we're extremely grateful to Prostate Cancer UK for supporting this work. And for the next 5 to 10 minutes, I'll talk through how we plan to evaluate this novel artificial intelligence tool in particular in how it might help us to understand the decision-making within the clinical pathway for patients. So I'm an honorary urology consultant and clinical academic here in Oxford, and I'm going to talk about how this might interact with what's called the MDT, which is the multidisciplinary team, which is basically the team of clinicians who ordinarily will see the biopsy results, the PSA values, the scan images of newly diagnosed patients, and who will then make treatment recommendations for those patients. And we're very keen to understand how this tool, as an extra layer of information, can help with the decision-making and the options for patients. Okay, so as you, I'm sure, all know, prostate cancer is an increasingly common condition and an increasingly large clinical problem for patients. 1 in 8 men approximately in the UK will develop prostate cancer in their lives. These images on this graph show how common it is. It's now the most commonly diagnosed cancer in England. And the incidence of this condition is rising, partly as we as men grow older, and partly because we're testing more for it. And not only is this a problem in the UK, but it's increasingly becoming a worldwide problem. This was data published just over a year ago in a leading journal showing the rise in cases of prostate cancer in the world. And you can see here that many of the Western countries already have very high levels of prostate cancer, but this is becoming increasingly a worldwide problem as individuals in other countries live longer and as testing is more common. And again, this is something that many of you will know about. Screening in prostate cancer is starting to be adopted or at least tested in many European countries, and indeed in the UK. Prostate Cancer UK and the UK government are funding the evaluation of screening to try to identify patients with prostate cancer at an earlier stage, to then look at the risk and benefit of that screening to understand better how we can improve screening. And so if screening becomes common practice or standard practice, we will of course find even more prostate cancer. And so the sorts of tools that we're talking about in this study today will become increasingly needed because of this large pool of patients that will need optimal decision making. So as Claire and Laura both mentioned, at the moment, what we use in the clinic is what are known as risk stratification scores. And by risk, what we mean is what would be the risk to the patient of disease progressing to become metastatic if they don't receive treatment. And this is quite a complicated set of next slides, but I'll keep it as simple as I can in the sense that the tools that we use at the moment for risk stratification, they are all based on a number of criterion. So one is that they include the PSA value, that's the blood test result. The second is that they use the Gleason score, which is what Claire was mentioning about the appearance of the prostate cancer down the microscope when the pathologist assigns a Gleason score. And it also incorporates what's called the stage of the tumor, which is the extent or lack of spread outside of the prostate gland. And when you know those three things, you can then place the patient within one of a number of risk categories. And you can see in the table on the left side of this slide, there are 5 Cambridge prognostic groups here, with 1 being the lowest risk and 5 being the highest risk. And what we offer patients, and what perhaps the patients on this call might know, is that they were offered various options based on their risk. This table, again, gives a little more detail about this, and don't worry too much about the actual detail. But if you look at the top half of the slide, these are the European Association of Urology categories for low risk, intermediate risk, and high risk prostate cancer. And you can see here that, for example, the PSA level, it's below 10 in the low risk, it's 10 to 20 in the intermediate risk, and then it's above 20 in the high risk. Where the patient lands within these risk categories will influence what they are offered. And this is lifted from the Prostate Cancer UK website. It's rather complicated, so don't worry too much about the details. But hopefully this gives a flavour of what options might be, given as options for patients depending on what risk category they are in. So, for example, the low-risk patients, the recommendation is for them to be offered active surveillance, which, as many of you will know, is a very close monitoring exercise, rather than having immediate treatment for their low-risk localized disease, because actually the treatment will more likely do harm than good and will cause long-term side effects with no potential improvement in survival in most patients. Whereas perhaps those with intermediate risk, and certainly those for high-risk localized prostate cancer, they would be offered treatment, usually in the form of either surgery or radiotherapy, and perhaps increasingly some focal therapy options. And then, of course, if the prostate cancer is spread outside of the prostate, then we almost always will treat those patients. So this is because prostate cancer, unlike many other types of solid organ cancers, it doesn't always need treatment. And this is an even more complicated version of the same thing. This is taken from our clinical guidelines. Now, we know, in fact, from many studies, but particularly this one, which was a large study, randomized clinical trial run initially from Sheffield and then latterly from Oxford in the UK, for patients with clinically localized prostate cancer. So in other words, prostate cancer that at the time had not appeared to have spread outside of the prostate. This was a huge study with just over 1,500 men randomized either to receive monitoring with no initial therapy, or to have surgery, or to have radiotherapy. And what this trial has now shown, and we're now currently at 15 years follow-up and shortly to be at 20 years follow-up, is actually the vast majority of these patients, as you can see in the survival curve, have not died of their prostate cancer. However, those who had treatment upfront less commonly developed distant metastases, in other words, spread of the disease up to 15 years after treatment, compared to those who had monitoring. So this tells us that the vast majority of patients with localized disease, they will do very well, regardless of whether they have surgery, radiotherapy, or monitoring. But what is becoming increasingly clear from the PROTECT study is that these risk categories that I mentioned in the earlier slides, they are not a complete panacea. And so there are quite a few patients in the PROTECT study who initially seemed to have low-risk disease, but who progressed and needed more advanced treatment, and indeed some have died of their prostate cancer. And on the other hand, there are some high-risk patients who actually didn't have initial treatment, and they've done extremely well. So this tells us that the risk stratification that I've been talking about isn't completely perfect, and we can do better. And that's where this Artera AI tool comes in, with the hope that this extra information that the tool will give us will aid more accurate decision-making and personalization of medicine options for future patients. So you've seen some of this detail already from Laura's talk, but basically the Artera artificial intelligence tool will be added in to the PSA blood test level, the clinical stage, and the Gleason grade to give us extra information, because it'll produce a score. And again, you've seen some of this detail already. The key point here is this is an example of where the Artera tool will give a score of risk for a low-risk patient. And you can see here for this patient, this is telling us that at 10 years into the future, the chance of this patient developing prostate cancer that spreads outside of the prostate is 1.8%. So almost a just over 98% chance that actually this patient won't develop metastases. So clearly, if this is perhaps a 75-year-old man, if you tell a 75-year-old man that in the next 10 years, he's got a less than 2% chance of his disease progressing without treatment, he would probably opt for no treatment. And that would probably be the right thing to do, because he's more likely to perhaps die with his prostate cancer than of his prostate cancer. And actually the risk here is that he gets treatment that he doesn't need, and he gets the side effects of treatment that he doesn't need. However, this is an example of the tool giving you a higher risk score. So this patient has a 10.6% risk at 10 years. So you might argue that this patient ought to be offered treatment. And that's what we hope to evaluate. So we will use this tool in what we call a shadow MDT. In other words, this is a panel of clinicians, X-ray doctors, oncology doctors or cancer doctors, where we will evaluate just over 1,600 real-world patients, fully anonymized, with their clinical parameters at diagnosis. And we will deploy this artificial intelligence tool to help us identify whether the options that would then be recommended for these patients, are they the same options as they are being offered in conventional management, or perhaps for a certain percentage of these patients, the options are different because of this now additional information. And there are three main groups of patients where I think this can really make a difference. And these are patients that we see week in, week out coming through the clinic. And I've listed them here in three main groups. So for those who currently we think that have low risk disease, could the tool actually identify that some of these low risk patients to whom we would normally now offer surveillance, can we actually find some higher risk patients within this category who may be better to be recommended treatment earlier? And can we be more certain that those who are being offered surveillance are being offered surveillance appropriately? So that's the first group of patients where this could have a real impact. The second group of patients are for those who currently are found to be high risk based on the current scoring. And could it actually be that some of those high risk patients are actually being overcalled as being high risk? And actually, in reality, they have lower risk disease, which might become more apparent with the use of this AI tool, so that we can de-escalate intervention. And in other words, avoid treating some of these patients who aren't likely to die of their prostate cancer, so that they can live their remaining years without the side effects and the toxicity of treatment that they didn't actually need. So this is really key to improve quality of life with no impact on patient survival. And then the third very niche group of patients are for those with prostate cancer that's confined to the prostate who are currently being offered radiotherapy to cure them of their prostate cancer. The question here in this third category is, do those patients need hormone treatment in combination with their radiotherapy, or can they potentially have radiotherapy alone without the hormone treatment? And in my experience, although I don't actually give the radiotherapy as I'm not a clinical oncologist, the many patients that we speak to, they particularly don't like the side effects of the hormone treatment that they have for between 1 and 3 years whilst they've been having radiotherapy. So can we, in some cases, avoid the side effects of hormone therapy? So I'll stop there and I'll stop sharing my slides and I'll hand back to Hayley. And thank you again to Prostate Cancer UK for the opportunity to speak and for funding this really exciting work. And back to you, Hayley.
Thank you very much, Richard, Laura and Claire. Thank you very much for really clear presentations. Really appreciate the time you've taken this evening to share that with us. I just want to say that I know that we've received a lot of thanks from the researchers, but actually the thanks goes to those people on the call, because we couldn't do any of this work without your help. So thank you ever so much to those who have already donated towards our work. It's thanks to your generosity that we're able to fund life-changing research such as this. And if you would like to give towards our work, my colleague is just about to pop a link into the chat now, and anything you're able to give would be gratefully received. So thank you very much. We are going to move on now to the question and answer session. So thank you very much if you've already put your question into the Q&A box. Please continue to do so. We've got about 15 minutes now to take your questions. I think one of the questions that I have is, we often hear, or a question we get asked a lot is, this is great, but how long is it going to take before a man can experience the benefit of this research? And given the title of a webinar is From Idea to Impact, I wondered if Richard, Claire, or Laura, if you'd like to comment on, where do you think you are on that timeline from an idea to impact? Because obviously a lot of work has already gone into this. So how long do you think it is before men will be able to benefit from this? But also maybe how many years of work has led to this?
Yeah, thank you. Maybe if I start, but I think probably Laura will have quite a lot to say on this topic, because obviously there has been a lot of time and resource gone into validating the tool to the level it is now, and maybe Laura can touch on sort of the kinds of approvals it has and what guidelines it's in. I think this study, as I alluded to, is going to plug the gap about how it's going to perform in the UK. I think it's fair to say a lot of the evidence around it is from the US, and that's what we're trying to do, is provide that evidence so that we can unlock that technology to be used in the NHS in the UK at scale. So yeah, that's what I see this study doing. Perhaps Laura, do you want to add something about the level of maturity of the technology?
Yes, yeah, thank you. So Artera as a company is only 4 years old. And so when we started as a company, we had a prototype model that was published that really showed the promise of this technology. It was in 2023 that the test first became clinically available in the United States for patients that are based here in the US. Since then, we now have received reimbursement from Medicare for this test. We also recently received our FDA clearance for the model, and we also are within the national clinical guidelines within the United States. And so, as Claire mentioned, the Vanguard Path study is so important because we also want to make sure that this test is not only for patients in one region, but it can be accessible elsewhere. And we think that it's going to be really critical for us to have this UK specific, NHS specific understanding of if the test validates within NHS workflows, within UK patients. And so that's why we're so excited about this study that Prostate Cancer UK has funded.
Thank you. And Richard, do you have a sense of how quickly, if your trial's successful, this will be rolled out and taken up?
Yeah, so the best answer I think I can give to this is within a very small number of years. Obviously, the tool is developed. This research program is designed to be delivered over 3 years. So I think we'll certainly have a sense within the next small number of years that this tool potentially adds value to a particular percentage of patients. And I've deliberately avoided giving a sort of an estimate as to what percentage that might be. But as we've talked about before, even if the percentage of patients that this benefits is a low percentage, given the huge number of patients out there who are likely to be diagnosed with localized disease in the future, even a small percentage of a big number is, of course, a big number.
Big number. Yeah, precisely.
Yeah, so I think we'll know. I mean, the light, again, as many of you will know, a lot of research that goes on in prostate cancer, you don't really get an answer as to whether there's benefit for often 10, 15, even 20 years down the line, because prostate cancer, to make an impact on the survivorship for patients, particularly those with very early stage disease, who, as I mentioned, often don't actually need treatment. To actually show a difference, you need a very long follow-up. I don't think that'll be the case in this study. I think this will be much quicker to give an answer.
And that's really exciting. Thank you, Claire, Laura, and Richard. Ian, I have a few questions for you, if that's okay. We understand that you're taking part in today because you were invited to take part in a fundraising appeal about this project. And we've had a few questions asking what it was like to share your story and sharing it in such a public way as well. What was that like?
Yeah, it's quite daunting. I've thought long and hard about it, and as I said, for the first 2 years of my diagnosis, I kept it very quiet, and I spoke to only a few very close friends of mine, all of my sort of age. And actually, even a few of them didn't know about PSA. And it turned out that when they had tests, a couple of them actually, they needed a little bit of attention. Just like Richard says, though, that they're being monitored and they didn't need any work. But it was interesting, and I just felt, well, if I don't know and they don't know, and we're all university educated people, there must be so many other people that don't. And I was nervous to come out as such, primarily because of my parents. If I went onto social media, they might find out, and they're very elderly and got very worried. But anyway, I took the decision, and I'm now very public with it. And I guess I'm 4 years into it, and I'm not doing too badly. And I just want I want people to understand, especially people who are, well, I want to let people who have known nothing about it, that they should get tested, and then they hopefully won't have to go through this. And then I want other people who are diagnosed as stage 4, that it's not the end of your life. Your life, my life is foreshortened. I'm not going to live till 83. But it's not been over. I've done an awfully good amount in the last 4 years. I've enjoyed myself. So, and yeah, it's difficult to talk about the issues that really are pretty horrible. Let's not beat about the bush. The sex life, it's a shame. But if it enables me to do other things, then so be it. And I'm very thankful. And when I first got it, was when I was first diagnosed, I was offered counselling with all sorts of people, and I went to see a few folk, and to be frank, they were all in their 70s, and most of them had an operation, and everything was great. And I felt, oh, I'm 50 and I'm not great, and I can't have an operation, and it got me down, and I've actually buried my head in the sand. But then, when Sir Chris Hoy came out and talked about it, I thought, yeah, I can do this as well. And it's nothing to be ashamed of. I'm 57 now. I don't mind telling people that I've got certain problems. I can't remember things. I'm a bit absent-minded, but I can also do other things. So I just want to let people know, Hayley, that it's not over. And also to thank Prostate Cancer UK for all the incredible work that you do, that has kept me and other men alive and given us a chance, because it would have been a lot worse without the advances in technology, so in medicine. So that's why I do it. And yeah, it was difficult at the start, but I'm overcoming it now. Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. There's a lot of love for you in the Q&A about being so open and honest about sharing your story. So I'm sure we'll share some of those messages with you, so you can recognise that people really appreciate you sharing your story with us this evening.
If I can just say, let's be honest about this. My life is like a sine wave now. There are some great times. There are also some bad times. So I don't want to paint a picture that everything's fantastic, because I do go through some low times, but friends, family, and other activities. So yeah, it's up and down. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you. We've got lots of questions coming in, so please keep them coming in, and we'll try to get through as many as possible. Please just remember not to put any personal information into your question, but if there is something you want specifically to ask, please do ask our nurses. I guess one question perhaps for Laura is, in simple terms, how is the Artera AI system different to something like ChatGPT? Is ChatGPT going to be able to help with this, or is it different?
That's a really great question. I hope I can answer it well. So, ChatGPT is an example of generative AI. You feed it information, it'll create something new for you. Our Terrace test is not generative. What our Terrace test does is trying to analyze what's being given to it, and it then produces something that is meant to be quantitative. And so for our Terrace test, what we are really proud of is the high level of validation we've had so far. Anytime we are testing our model, we are locking it, applying it to a certain set of data. So we know, like, for these patients with these circumstances, this is how well the test does, that it either is or is not prognostic, or is or is not predictive. Whereas with ChatGPT, it will be giving you like new information, trying to generate new things as you're giving it more information. I hope that helps. So let me know, Hayley.
Thank you. It makes sense to me. It helps. Yeah, I think so. Thank you. Claire, we have a question for you, and it's around your job title. Correct me if I'm wrong, but your job title is a Professor of Pathology and AI?
Yeah, Professor of Cellular Pathology and AI. So
Yeah. So I
yeah,
think the question is, how did those two worlds collide?
yeah, good question. And I feel like I've been in the right place at the right time through a lot of this because I started as an NHS histopathologist on the South Coast as a consultant, and I specialise in neurological pathology. And it just so happens that a lot of the focus, as I mentioned, in AI has been around prostate. So I relocated to Oxford a couple of years later, and it so happened that Professor of Surgery in Oxford is a urologist, and so invited me to join the university. And then it was just at the same time as lots of funding was being poured into histopathology to realise the life sciences strategy. And so there was, research funding and other funding from bodies such as Innovate UK for digital pathology deployment and also AI studies. And so I just kept seeing opportunities come up and took them and applied for things and got the funding. And this is my sort of third or fourth big technology / AI grant. So yeah, it's just kind of, yeah, it's just been a really interesting journey.
Sounds fascinating, and I really enjoyed in your talk when you were talking about assembling a team. It kind of made me feel a little bit like the Avengers assemble. You were kind of like, who are you gonna bring together for this next big project? How easy is it to do that? Are people knocking down your door to work with you? Are you having to go out and seek expertise? How does that happen?
Yeah, so that's one of the things I really like doing is sort of enthusing and motivating a group of people. And as I've mentioned, we're spread across computer science, statistics, urology, oncology, pathology. So they really are very diverse teams that we put together. And you sort of have to have a working understanding of each other's jobs and roles, etc. So I haven't, it's like, as I've mentioned, it's about the third or fourth study like this that I've done. So I've got quite a lot of established collaborators, and then I have other people that I bring in and out as needed. But I'm always so touched and to see how enthusiastic everybody is. Yeah, and people are like no one ever says no to working on these studies. And yeah, it's you feel like you're really doing game-changing work and changing sort of clinical practice for the future. So yeah, so I don't have much trouble getting people involved, put it that way.
Oh, excellent. I'm glad. Um, okay, we're running out of time, so this might be the last question. Um, I'm going to try and find one that's relevant for everyone. Um, so I guess if there was one thing that you hope that this project's going to enable you to do, what is that in a nutshell? And I guess you can all kind of come from it from different perspectives. So I wonder if is it unfair, Ian, to ask you if there's one thing to come out of what you've heard tonight, what would it be? Shall I come back to you at the end? Yeah, okay. How about Claire, if I ask you first because you're off mute?
Gosh, yeah, there's so much that we want to
I
achieve. It's
know.
difficult to put it in a nutshell, but I think that we would have taken, one of the first of these novel AIs and have really road tested it in an NHS environment. And that's the big step towards having it in routine practice. And, that's one of the first examples, if not the first example of that happening in the UK. So, yes, it's really exciting.
Very exciting. Richard, can I come to you next?
Yeah, so one of the big hopes that I have for this is that we do actually see that in some patients with localized prostate cancer, the Artera tool really does give us some extra information so that we can better either have confidence that the patient really does need treatment, whether that be surgery or radiotherapy to cure him of his disease, but of course have the side effects of the treatment. Or could we offer active surveillance for some of those patients? And on the flip side of the coin, those men where we're currently offering surveillance, could it be that we have more confidence that actually they should really have treatment? And I chair the MDT in Oxford, and we see dozens and dozens of these patients every week in our MDT, where we will say that surveillance is an option or treatment. And the reality is we really don't know for some of those patients because they're very different strategies, obviously, right? To treat or not to treat. So that's what I'm really excited to see. And we will know that, I think, within a small number of years. And that will have an impact.
Well, that's going to have a big impact. Laura, can I come to you?
Yes. So for me, I feel like my answer is similar to Richard's. I had mentioned in my presentation that the goal behind all of our Terra's tools and what we try to develop is to really reduce both over and under treatment. And so if this study is able to show that our Terra test can do that, that it's really providing more precise information that patients can use to act on and choose the right treatment for them, that will be a huge win for all of us. I just we build these tools because we want them to be actually useful. We want them to have a meaningful difference for patients. And I hope that will be the outcome of the study.
Thank you. And Ian, if it's a really unfair question, I have a backup question.
No, it's triggered something in my mind. I'm sure a lot of men used to be quite frightened of the test and going and getting discovered the way that they did it, and obviously now that there are that if there are better ways of detecting and then the implications of what's being done. I mean, the big thing that Richard was talking about is, do people need the operation or not? Intrusive, because yes, I didn't know until I've been involved with all of this. There is a chance of severe incontinence. I've not had any operation. I've just had the hormone treatment. So I don't have to really worry about incontinence, but I do have the hormone, and as many ladies know, the menopause or the menopause is pretty tricky. And as you can see now, I can tell that I'm struggling to get my words out because it's something different. But yeah, and the publicity, the more public things can be made, the more men will come forward and can be saved more quickly. And yeah, if you don't need to give them an operation, don't. And if you do it all seemed to make sense. It was new stuff to me, and I'm very, very impressed with it to make a lot of people very happy. So that's good.
Thank you. Thank you ever so much for taking part this evening. I'm going to move us along. So thank you very much to our speakers, so to Ian, to Claire, to Richard, and to Laura. Please do keep an eye out for our next webinar, which will be held on Monday, the 16th of March, and we'll discuss our Transform trial. More details are about to go into the chat now. If you would like to provide a donation to the charity, the links are all in the chat, and as we've discussed, we spend your money very wisely on some really cool research that will make an impact for men. We do have one further poll to quickly complete, and this is just to provide some initial feedback on this webinar. All of your answers are anonymous, and there will be an opportunity to share further feedback and ideas in a post-event survey, which I'm assured will be sent out tomorrow. So please keep an eye on your inboxes for that survey tomorrow. So this survey is simply, how do you rate today's webinar? We're not going to share your results, so I'm just going to wait for a few moments for you to complete that. And I think we're okay. So thank you very much to all the speakers. Thank you you at home for listening, and have a fantastic evening. Thank you very, very much. Good night.